Where did this computer? Okay, so welcome to part number 36 of Faith and Calm. The title is designed by my wife, so I don't know exactly what the, I think yourself, what is it? Finding yourself after you get lost?
No.
What is
The
the title?
The title is how to find something you lost, including your mind.
In your mind.
Okay.
Okay,
You should look at the camera.
I should look at the camera.
How to find
Hi, sorry, how you doing?
Hi. What is the thing?
Good to see you.
The topic is how to find
How to find
Something you
something
lost,
lost,
including your
yourself,
mind.
mind.
including
And this is
your mind.
part
That's your
36.
idea. That's your idea to have that title.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's my idea.
But I'll start out and I'll put it in context, I guess. And I'll put it in the context of the Parsha. So the Parsha this last week was talking about the first Jewish wedding, which is interesting. It's because it's really the source of all the Jewish people. Happened from this story. And we're pretty much familiar with the story, but I just want to point out how hysterical the story is when you really think about it. It's not a normal story. And that might explain something about the Jewish people also and how normal we are, because we all come from this particular story. This is the source of who we are, and these are our parents. This is where we come from, and it might explain a little bit of some of the difficulties and challenges we have. And Faith and Calm. So prepare yourself, because if you haven't looked at it this way, you really should understand the story this way, I think. It's an odd story. As we know, in the Parsha before, Yaakov has to run away from his home, from Isaac, and from his mother, Rivka, because his brother wants to kill him. And he first goes to yeshiva, and then he goes at the beginning of the Parsha, he has a dream in Har Moriah. And then he heads for 20 years to Haran, where his uncle lives, Laban, and to get married. And he arrives there and he sees a beautiful girl whose name is Rachel. And she's pretty. She looks nice. Her face is nice. Rachel. And her face is beautiful. Her form is beautiful. And he wants to marry her. So he goes, as you do in those days, to the father, her father. Says, "Can I marry her?" And he says, "Yeah, why not? I have no problems with that. You just have to work 7 years for me. That's all." So he works for her for 7 years. And then we have the very first wedding ceremony in the Jewish story, in the history. And there is a wedding, and everybody in town is invited, and there's musicians, and everybody arrives at the wedding. And that night, in the bride, by the way, she's veiled; you can't see her. And that night, Yaakov takes his wife home, and he consummates the marriage. And just get the picture. The next morning, the sun is beginning to enter the tent. And he looks and he goes, "Oops, wrong girl." It's not Rachel, it's Leah. So he runs to his father-in-law and he says, "Why did you deceive me?" And Lavan tells him, he says, "It's not moral. You don't give the younger one before the older one." And from this, we learn that arguing with a swindler will just make you feel bad, because you know you're really dealing with a swindler, because he starts making you feel guilty when he's the one who did the trick. So then he has to work for another 7 years for Rachel. And this, I'm telling you, the things that you should understand from this, all the Jewish people come from this story. So, if we have problems in our relationships, it starts here, Why 2 wives? Why does he think he's getting married to Rachel? And then he finds he's married to Rachel. Leah. 4. Sorry, you have something to say? Yep. What? Oh yeah, he marries 4 wives. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's like, it's yeah. And then let's ask another little interesting question. As everybody's gone to a Jewish wedding, it's the custom is to put a veil over the bride when she gets married so that you don't see her. So the question is, it really should be the opposite way. Where do we learn this whole story from? From the story of Rachel and Leah. So really, we should take the veil off to see who you're getting married to, because you don't want the same mistake that could happen. Who knows who's under the veil? It could be Hillary. I mean, imagine what could happen. You don't know who you're marrying, so it's like it's really it's very strange. Why do we continue to do this? You really should be looking to find out, so you don't have the same problem that we had when we first got the first Jewish marriage happened. And then, of course, that we have the other problem, which is that, most of his life, Yaakov did not live with Rachel. Rachel passed away at a young age, and most of the rest of his life, he was with Leah, and then he was buried together with Leah in Kever Machpelah. So for the last 3,800 or so years, he's been together with Leah, not with Rachel. So now, as I've said
Why is
before,
that?
why is that? Why is the whole thing like this? Why do we have this? And why is this the message? And this is a message of, this is the only real story we have about a marriage and Jewish marriage. And this is a message for all generations. It's not just a story that happened to some people a couple thousand years ago. It's really supposed to be a lesson about us and who we are, and about the Torah is a book of instruction for our lives. And it says Masa Avos Siman Labanim, means that what happened to the forefathers is actually repeats ourselves in our lives. And so when we want to understand our lives, we can look at the Chumash and we can try and understand what's going on with who we are. So this is what it tells us we have some issues. And we need to understand it. So it's good questions, right? I think it's good questions. I hope it's good questions. So let's understand this idea here. Rachel, how the Kabbalists understand this. So in mystical terms, Rachel the name Rachel means sheep. She was nice. She was pretty. She was nice looking. A sheep also has nice, it looks nice. It's passive. It doesn't cause a lot of trouble and so forth. And Rachel, the gematria, the numerical value of Rachel is the same as 238, which means the same thing as Vahi Or. There was light, because Rachel, it was the light of the party. When she came into the room, everybody liked her. She was lively, she was friendly, she was happy, she made you feel good. She had a positive glow influence around you. And this also is sheep is not a difficult person, You ever try and shave a goat? Not going to stand by very long, but a sheep, it's passive. It doesn't get, it doesn't cause a lot of trouble. So a sheep is nice and it's easy to get along with. And we always like Rachel type of people, and the Rachel in ourselves we like also. So that's the psychological idea of a Rachel. A Rachel is that which, the kind of person that it's easy to get along with, and we like to be around them, and they make us feel good. And then there's Leah. What does Leah mean? So Leah, the word Leah in Hebrew means, probably only Yale would know the answer to this one. Leah means mala'ah. It means worn out, exhausted, tired. And as we know, Leah was a deep person, a deep psychological, had issues, and her eyes were weak. And it says in the Medrash, the reason her eyes were weak is because she spent a lot of time crying. Because people who have issues and have troubles, and skeletons and ghosts and demons and so forth, they struggle a lot with themselves. That's the kind of person who really has a lot of difficulty in life, and does a lot of weeping in life. Not only, there wasn't just Asaph, it was just, she just had, difficulties. So the Torah is teaching us that we have 2 marriages, and this marriages is not just about people; it's also about ourselves too. I'll explain that also, what I mean there. So when you get married, who do you marry? You marry the person you fell in love with, that wonderful sheep-like person who just made you feel wonderful. You think you're getting married to Rachel. Wow, this is fantastic. I love this guy. He is interesting. He is exciting. He likes listening to me. I fall in love with the Rachel. The Rachel is not just the girl, it's the man too. So I like that person. The thing is, the next morning you wake up and you find out that you're married to Leah. That's the humor of the story. You find out that, you know what, it's not all that. There's other parts to everybody's personality, but in ourselves. Some days you wake up and you think it's like, the day is going to go like a Rachel day. I had this wonderful plan and everything was going great. And then all of a sudden, life hits you and it doesn't go the way you want. And it turns out to be a Leah day. And you're like, at the end of the day, you're just going, oh my gosh, we'll get that to the next day, and so forth. That's the Leah in the story. So Leah is not just the people, but it's also ourselves. And it varies sometimes several times in the day. You can go through a Rachel experience and then a Leah experience, and a Rachel experience and a Leah experience. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? So,
Yes.
some people, they do the whole life is just Rachel, but I have to expect that most people, their days, they go Rachel, Leah, Leah, Rachel. Oh my gosh, which one am I married to? Myself. I'm married to myself. It's not a Rachel experience. It's a Leah experience. And I'm really not experienced. I'm going to cry about this one. My eyes are weak, because it's not going the way I thought it was supposed to go. So Rabbi Wai, who was giving this talk, he was very funny. So he says, a woman came up to him once and she said, she was a Manhattan girl. And she said, I recently married my high school sweetheart. We've been dating for 18 years. 18 years is not long in Manhattan. 18 years we were dating together. And after 18 years, we decided to get married. And last year we got married. And now for 8 months, we've been yelling and screaming at each other. And it's arguments and so forth. Why is this happening? I knew him very well, 18 years. And he says, it's because you thought you were marrying Rachel, but you married Leah. And that's the guy. Why? Why is it? Because the guys can be like that too. Because a guy, when he's dating, he can pretend to be a member of the human race. He's nice. He opens the car door for you. He listens to you for 2 hours. He asks how your day was. He's so sensitive. He's so smart. He's so interested. How was the day before? What were you doing? He's like a human being and so forth. But that's only because he can go home to his own apartment afterwards and, and kick off his shoes and open the refrigerator and down the beer and potato chips and sit and watch the TV, two people from Czechoslovakia playing tennis we never heard of before and so forth. And nobody yells at him and nobody says, what a slob you are. And why aren't you listening to me? And why aren't you sensitive to me? He can just be who he wants to be, and so forth like that. But when you get married, that's when things start. That's when you discover the whole personality, that there's a Leah personality there too. And it's not so easy to get along with. So Torah is teaching us an important lesson and so forth. He said, if you first saw Leah when you were dating, you would never marry that person. You would see the Leah in that person, you'd run away. So God in his infinite humor has us fall in love with the Rachel. But the message is that the person who's supposed to be your partner in life is the Leah. Because the Rachel doesn't challenge you. The Leah challenges you to grow and to make space for another person, and to find out about who you truly are by being not who you are. If you just married a Rachel, it would really be just like marrying yourself, because the Rachel is the reflection of who you think you're supposed to marry. It's the person that you thought that your marriage would be, like walking on the beach without your shoes, with Bach playing and listening to the waves and all these other things. And that's not really a marriage. Marriage is involved with Leah. And if you marry yourself, it's like that guy with the t-shirt who said, I'm very easy to get along with as long as you learn to worship me, marriage isn't like that. You don't get the mirror reflection of who you think you're supposed to marry. Or as Nietzsche says, we don't fall in love with people, we fall in love with the image that we think the person is. So it's not really Rachel that we marry, it's Leah that we marry, and Leah who's the one we're supposed to marry. Because when we marry Leah and we work through that, and we make space for that person, and we open ourselves up to let that person challenge us and shake us, and like Yaakov, and he was shaking and he was quaking and so forth, then you actually grow to become who you're supposed to be. And then you find out that the two merge together and that really Leah is Rachel. So the sequence goes as follows. First, you think you're marrying Rachel. Then you find out you're married to Leah and you got to start working through the issues of marriage. And then you find out you're married to Rachel. And that really is the preparation for all of us who still need to get married. You know, this attitude is really going to help you to get married. And this is the important step, is to realize, you know what, it's going to be some work involved in it. Whereas the one lady told me when at Sheva Brachas, she said, you know, she had her marriage advice, which is that they tell you what your Sheva Brachas. She said, you know, she was a nurse. She's very practical. She said, it's marriage. Yeah, it's doable and it's worth it. Meaning it's you know, it's you're gonna discover a lot about yourself in the marriage, you know, and so forth, because you're gonna come to face with another person who's really has a different way of looking at things and has their own issues and own challenges, and you don't know what to do about those issues and challenges and so forth. But you got to help them. You have to help them work through it out, and you have to work through it out yourself. You have to make space for that other person. So yeah, so this is the story of why they cover over the Kala at the wedding. Because if you actually saw who you were marrying, you would run away. So you got to hide that. She's got to hide from you. You got to hide from her because you can't really, the message is don't really know. You've been dating for a long time and you think you know who you're marrying, but actually you won't find out who you're marrying because life will change that person, change you, and it will change that person. And you're promising to live with that person for the rest of your life. So it's not going to be the same person. So you cover over her head and you put a veil on her because it really is the message of wedding is that, you know, you don't know who actually the person that you're marrying are, but you're making a commitment to be with that person to help on the discovery path of life, and you'll discover life together, who you are and what you're doing. So yeah, we marry Rachel and we find out we're married to Leah. So I mean, this doesn't only work, you know. So I'm going to tell an interesting story that I heard. It's a Rebbe story. I thought it also relates to this whole thing. So I saw there was a video a year or so ago came out. It was a lady who's been a shaliach with her husband in Florida for many years, an emissary of the Rebbe. And she was telling the story. He was telling the story. I guess he was the one who was actually giving over the story, but it's about him and his wife when they got engaged. So the custom is that the week before the wedding, the Kala does not get to see the groom. They're apart, and each one is considered like a princess, a queen, and a king. They have an escort together with them, and all the shopping and everything they have to do, they do.
9 1 4 5 8 4 6 9 7 6.
They do through there, and if they have to send any messages, they have to send it through one of their agents to each other. So they don't see each other for the week before. But in the early days, in Crown Heights especially, then, you know, the custom was that you were able to have a yechidus, a private audience together with the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And that would happen during that week. So 4 days before the wedding, they both appeared at 770, and they both went in to see the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And so that was the first time they saw each other that whole week. And they didn't talk to each other because they were talking to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And they both talked for a few minutes. And then the Kala, she asked the Rebbe, she says, I'd like to speak to you privately. So the Rebbe shooed the guy out of the room. And he's wondering to himself, what? He didn't get the answer for 4 more days because he couldn't see her and couldn't find out. And she then had a private audience with the Rebbe. So when 4 days later, when they were in the Yechidus room right after the wedding, he immediately asked her, what happened? What did you ask the Rebbe? What were you in there for? What was so important that you needed to talk? So she says, she told the Rebbe that she doesn't want to get married. She loves her her future husband, thinks he's a fantastic person. And because she loves him so much, she doesn't want him to find out that she has she's a very impatient person. and she gets frustrated and angry very easily. There are family issues, whatever. And she this was her personality, and she knew this. And therefore she said she doesn't want to hurt her husband, her future husband. And so she really thinks that maybe she should call off the wedding altogether. The Rebbe listens. The Rebbe gets one of his big, big smiles. And he tells her, he says, I don't think you have to worry about this. So when you start having children, you will learn to become more patient. And in the meantime, I advise you that you should become a volunteer at the local hospital in the children's ward, and you will learn to have more patience. And that it was. And she had a big family, and she developed more patience. So there's a Leah inside of us, Yeah. And we don't get anywhere by trying to hide it or pretend we don't do it or think that we're only a Rachel, because that's, as I said, there's always a part of us that's a Rachel and there's a part of us that's a Leah, except for some unique individuals. Most of us go through these cycles several times during a day. And so the fight is inside of us. And the thing we have to embrace is the Leahs inside of us too. So if we get knocked off our course and our balance is we lose our balance and we're rocking back and forth and the emotions are driving us crazy and this thing and that thing. And then another thing comes and another thing comes and over like that. Embrace your Leah, because that's who you were supposed to be. It's not the Rachel necessarily. The Leah is the reason your soul is in this world. And the Leah is who you're supposed to grow through and to become who you are, because that's what challenges you to have real growth. And I think that's the important lesson that the Torah is teaching us in this parsha. And it's teaching us something about ourselves. And that's what the real message is when we learn the Torah is about. So I'm going to turn over the conversation to my
that
wife.
was really great. I really so appreciated all of that tonight. I think that was terrific. I guess, and the stuff about marriage is really useful, but I wanted to say about Leah, I always had a very negative view about Leah, and I feel like kind of the way you talked about her weak eyes, looking at her as sort of having depression changed that for me. Like I was like, oh, Leah, she stole the mandrake. She knew how much her sister was hurting, and she gathered all the mandrakes and hid them, and that's so petty, and here she is, one of our main matriarchs. But
Amy, that's not a Torah story.
She never stole the mandrakes.
She didn't sell them. No, okay. I'll tell you the mandrake story when I get on. Yeah, go ahead.
But Leah, first off, they were identical twins. Let me tell you this one. You never know this one. They were identical. The reason Leah's eyes were weak is because she was a sensitive soul. And she had these, she had a lot of things going on inside of herself. That's why they said she should be the perfect bride for Esav, because he also had, as we learned last week, Esav also was a challenged person. So they figured, Leah, it says that Leah should go for Esav and Yaakov should go together with Rachel. Who said this? I mean, God basically was saying that these were ideal partners for each other. The problem was Leah was a holy person. She took her challenges, but she worked with herself. And by working with herself, she became a great person. And she had all these children. And she really was a great person. She was she was one of the great emos of the generation. So she was, but she had to work at it. She didn't get it handed on a platter. She had everything she fought for. She fought to get to get that stability in herself, because it wasn't easy. She wasn't given she wasn't given a personality that was going to make it easy for her. Like I heard YY saying, sometimes women go to a bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, and so forth, and somebody says something to them and they weren't even thinking, and you go home and and for like a week you're wondering, you're furious at that person and you're angry at them, and everybody else is going, what are you so upset about? I mean, all they were talking about were about shekels and iPhones and and gas prices and other things. I mean, some people are just very, they just don't take things personally, and they're just involved in the day-to-day work and stuff like that. And some people, it's like, a little thing will just really get to them and so forth. So, sensitive people are sensitive people, but sensitive people are also great people because because of their sensitivity, they can connect with other people and they can relate to other people and they can elevate other people and so forth. But, it's not an easy life. What did Miriam Adahan say, and so
I
forth?
don't know. I
You
didn't
remember
read her
that?
stuff. No.
Yeah, you
read
said
her stuff.
about the ENFPs.
She came across another, she, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Somebody was an ENFP, came over to her and said, said
INFP.
INFP. And he says, I have the same letters as you do. I'm an INFP and you are. And she says, my deepest sympathies for you. Because if you're an INFP and you know what that means, it's not an easy life. It's everybody's issues to like tears your kishkis out. So I think that's who Leah was. She was somebody who was.
We don't put letters on emotes.
Emotes.
Yeah.
Okay, we don't.
Yeah.
All right, I'm off.
Yechezkel Shimon, I didn't know that they were identical twins.
Yeah.
Leah and Rachel were.
Yeah.
I never heard that before. Is that something that's in the Parsha itself?
In the Medrash.
On the Midrash.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is it possible he couldn't have told them apart anyway?
It would have been difficult, but he knew beforehand.
They had a
He
secret
knew
password.
when he first met Rachel in the Parsha, it says, he explains to him that, to Rachel that he is the brother of Lavan. And so the Medrash has to explain, what do you mean the brother of Lavan? She said, basically, Yaakov was saying, I already know from my mother what my uncle is like. I know that he's the biggest schwindler in Haran, which is a town of schwindlers, and so forth. The whole town was like that. That's why they had to put the rock on the well, because if anybody came first, they would take all the water out of the well. So the whole town was basically, thievery was like, Alibaba and the 40 Thieves. That was the town. It was really, everybody stole from anybody. But Lavan was one of the chief guys. He was like really good at it. So Yaakov, when he first met Rachel, he said, to Lavan, he says, listen, I'm going to serve 7 years, but for who? For Rachel, your younger daughter. What else did he say?
He put some,
Yeah, 3 things. He said, Yaakov, for your younger daughter, for Rachel. I forget the third one, but anyway, each one was, to identify her, because maybe, he'll find another Rachel. And then he'll call her Rachel and he'll marry her off to me. Or he'll give me off the older daughter. And he says, no, I mean the younger daughter, and so forth. And Rashi concludes and he says it didn't help anyway, because as much as you try and make a peace agreement with a schwindler and an agreement and so forth, he's going to find some escape clause to get out of it. So that was the nature of Lavan. And that's, and we see that even later on when they make a deal with how many sheep, whether it's going to be the spotted ones or the speckled ones or the white ones or something like that. And Yaakov says, you changed my wages 100 times. Each time you changed it back and forth. It was just like, it was a very difficult relationship with both your employer and your father-in-law, who was just Mr. Schwindler. So yeah, it was
Mr. Unreliable.
More than that. He was like, you couldn't, this was a tough job. That was a tough period of time for him. So we relate very much to Yaakov because he had a very hard life. He had a hard life in there. He had a hard life with his father-in-law, and then later he has a hard life with the whole what happens to Dinah, and then he has a hard life because Yosef is stolen and the children and so forth. But Yaakov is also our lesson. After all of this, he's called Yisrael. He's called the father of the Jewish people because he really relates most to us, and he's because he teaches us how we get through a world which is full of all sorts of chicanery and falsehood and thievery and so forth, and raise a wonderful family of 12 perfect children. So I'll turn it over the phone to
13. Yeah.
Shalom.
Thank you, Yesher Koach.
Okay, good.
13 children, right? Didn't he have
13. I was whispering
13 children?
13. So, yeah. Okay, good. So, hello, everybody. Good to see you all.
Hi.
And we have some new people here tonight, so it's very good to see everybody. Okay, so the title that we picked is really from my half. I think the title was something like a great tool for finding something that you lost, including your mind. So before we go into that, I'm going to start the way I always do, which is to say a few things about my section of the class, which is that, okay, 4 things I like to say. Number 1, we're living in an extraordinary time, absolutely extraordinary. And what is extraordinary about it? The Lubavitcher Rebbe told us in 1991 that we are entering into the stage of the Geula. We are entering into the total redemption of the whole world and the Jewish people. And it's something that the Jewish people have been waiting for thousands of years. And we also talk about each week about how you and I, we were all handpicked to be in this generation, to be at this critical junction in Jewish history. And something that I don't mention often is that we said before, our souls are the same souls that came out of Egypt. We went through a major transition once before in life. We've been through this before. We left slavery in Egypt and we went into the desert, and all the women went into Israel. And but even more than that, we probably were here even more than once. Everybody here, virtually everybody on earth, pretty much everybody on earth is an old soul. We've all been here before. 3 times, sometimes different amounts of times, and we have tools that we have strengths from the other times that we were in the world, and we can draw on those strengths. But when we're in a tight spot, this is not, however long you've lived longer than that, and you can draw on the strengths from those previous lives. And the third thing I usually say is that Hashem didn't leave us abandoned in this. He gave us tons of tools. He gave us himself, where Hashem is totally accessible. No matter what time of day or night you need him, he's totally accessible. He's never bored, and he listens to us constantly. And he's not irritated when we repeat ourselves. And he also gave us mitzvos, which are incredible tools to change ourselves and the world. He gave us the Torah, which tells us everything we need to know, and it tells us exactly, it predicted everything that's happening now. And he gave us amazing leaders. And I usually give these 2 examples, like Moses and like the Rebbe, like the Lubavitcher Rebbe. And the last thing I say is that tonight we are furthering the cause of the redemption, because the Rebbe said the fastest way to speed up the redemption is to learn about it. And that's what we're doing. So, and I also, each week I like to do a little review of the week before. And in the week before, we were talking about a mitzvah, and we said that a mitzvah is more than a good deed. Lots of people, it's usually translated as a good deed. It's a lot more than a good deed. Yes, you're doing a good deed, you're doing something for the world, but even more than that, it's even more than when you do a mitzvah, you pull down blessing for yourself and for the whole world, but it's even more than that. When you do a mitzvah, you actually reveal your own soul. You reveal the light of your own soul. And if you don't do the mitzvah, the light is like trapped. And by doing mitzvahs, you become the person you were always meant to be. It's the greatest enabler, better than any other self-help tool. It enables you to become who you were meant to be. And we spoke last week a little bit about, you can see that in older Jews, that as we said, a mitzvah reveals the light of the soul. I spoke a little bit about my neighbor last week and how she glowed, her face glowed, and I was heartbroken that I couldn't kiss that face before she passed away, because I just wanted to there's a Jewish expression, a Yiddish expression, chap, means grab. I wanted to chap a little of that holiness. So I was thinking about it, and there's so many examples of older Jews who glow. There was I remember when I first started to be interested in Yiddishkeit, in Judaism, I moved to a city called Monsey that's full of people who do mitzvahs. And there was an elderly Jew there. His name was Mordechai Schwab, Rabbi Mordechai Schwab. And his face was like, it just glowed. It was amazing. He was an old, stooped over man, and he would walk like this. His head would bob up and down when he was walking. And there was a glow that came from that turned down face. And I remember one time I heard this story when I was in Muncie. There were some kids, older kids, and they were playing Frisbee. And they threw the Frisbee, and Rabbi Schwab is walking on Saddle River Road, as he always did, and walking like this with, I have to go up a little higher, like this, and his head's bobbing as he's walking. He's like all of maybe, I don't know, 5 feet tall, who knows? He was this short man, bobbing up and down. And they said, oh my gosh, the Frisbee's going straight for his head. And they didn't know what to do. They didn't know what to do. He's not going to be able to run. And so right as the Frisbee goes for him, he bobs the head down and goes straight over, and he bobs the head up, and he didn't even know that anything had happened. Didn't even know anything had happened. But there is a even more classic story of a shining face. And I think I might have told this story briefly in one of the very early sessions, but it's worth telling again. And before I was a Lubavitcher, I started reading the works of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. I had already been an observant Jew for several years. And when I came across the Rebbe's writings, I fell in love, because as much as I love Torah, this was like, I felt it was like the doors were swung open. It was so beautiful, so optimistic, so broad, and broader than anything I'd ever seen. And so I decided to go to Crown Heights. And the first time I spent Shabbos in Crown Heights, a friend of mine, Shoshana Bander, invited me to join her. And I slept in a basement. She was single, and I slept in a basement somewhere. And and I was used to living in Muncie, New York, where everything is so prim and proper. It is an ideal firm community. It's truly extraordinary. It really is extraordinary. And it's very orderly, extremely orderly, and amazing and orderly. And Crown Heights was not like that. It didn't look like Muncie. And I remember I came into we went to Shul. We went to the big Shul, 770, on Shabbos morning. And we knew that the Rebbe would come in. The Rebbe was probably 90 or close to 90 at that time. And probably 90. And I was waiting. I had seen the Rebbe once when I came from for dollars one time a while back. But anyway, we were waiting in the ladies section. The ladies section in 770 is a balcony that sort of wraps around the synagogue, and there were, back then people would, like, plane loads of people would arrive for a particular Shabbos. I have to close the door for the noise. Plane loads of people would arrive from other countries just to go to 770. And there had been like a plane load of ladies from another country, and from a European country. And they were there in the synagogue, and they were, the synagogue was always crowded, but they made it even more crowded. And what were they doing? There were bleachers. The ladies sat on bleachers, and they were climbing all over the bleachers to get the best position possible in order to see the Rebbe when he came in, because the Rebbe wasn't in yet. It was before 10 a.m. And I looked around and I saw all these ladies dressed in their Shabbos finery, climbing all over the furniture. You would never see something like that in Muncie, never. And I said, what is this? What's going on here? I said to myself, don't these ladies know this is not a zoo, this is a synagogue. This is not a baseball field, it's a synagogue. You don't climb on the furniture. And as I'm making my value judgments, all of a sudden there was a stir down in the men's section, and the Rebbe had walked in, and he and I didn't get to see the Rebbe's face. The Rebbe, they used to make, it was called a shvil. The people would part, the men would make a path for the Rebbe. The Rebbe walked through, and he went up to his podium, and I couldn't see anything. The only thing I could see was, I couldn't even see, I usually say I could see the back. I couldn't even see the back of his head. I saw the back of his hat and the back of his head underneath the hat. And as this was happening, I heard somebody scream, "How nice!" And I was thinking, oh golly, what do they think this place is? You don't shout in a shul. And all of a sudden I realized that it had been me who shouted. And just from seeing the back of the Rebbe's head, I said, how nice. As the light that was coming out of the back, the tiny section of the back of the head that I saw was one of the most beautiful things my soul had ever seen. And the same thing in a more minor scale happens to you and I when we do mitzvahs. We gain a glow. There is a glow that comes from people comes from all the mitzvahs. Now, since Jews as a whole, even if they don't know about the Torah, they're full of mitzvahs. They're so kind. They do, Jews give vast amounts of tzedakah, whether they know about Torah or not. There's no other people like it on the face of the earth. So all Jews glow. And but anyway, when you actively do mitzvahs, you add to your glow. So so that's the review from last week. And now we're going to go on to our topic: how to find a lost object, even your mind. and I may have told a few of you this, but I've seen in my own life. This is not Torah. This is just an observation from my own life. I've seen in my own life that Hashem rewards calm. When I have lost my keys and I'm already, 10, 20 minutes late to go to the doctor, to arrive there on time, or something like that, something really pressing, you have to get out the door, you're going to be in trouble. And I can't find those car keys. It's happened to all of us, I'm sure. Maybe not the more organized of you, but to some of us it happens, or you forgot something that you absolutely need. And it's like crazy. Why am I missing it now? Why now? I can't find it. It's driving me crazy. And the more crazy I get, the more the search continues. As long as I am crazy and out of my mind, as long as I am nervous, I will not find that object. I rarely find something when I'm nervous, rarely. But when I remember Shlomo Yehudis, Hashem rewards calm. And I calm down and I say, I'm not worried. Hashem is going to help me. Wait, just you see. Within seconds or a minute, almost invariably, I find it. I find the keys. I find whatever it is that I was looking for. And it's happened so often to me that it's a truism for me that if you lose something, the first thing you should do is totally calm down and trust that you will find it. Trust that you will find it. And walk slowly. Don't do anything in a panic. And very often, the thing that you're looking for is right in front of your eyes. It's not even covered by something very often. It's right in front of your eyes. It can even be in a place where you looked 5 or 6 times already. And I think we learned that from the Torah. There was, if you remember the story of Hagar, Hagar was the wife. She was a maid servant, and Sarah, when she wasn't having kids, Abraham's wife Sarah, told Abraham, "Take my maid servant, marry her too, and I will have children from her, and I will raise them, and maybe through that I'll have my own children as well." And he did it, and she gave birth, and unfortunately, Yishmael didn't live up to Yishmael's soul. Came from an extremely lofty place in heaven. Yishmael could have been unbelievable, but Yishmael didn't live up to his potential, like Esav. And Esav was Jewish. Yishmael was not Jewish, but Yishmael also had a very lofty soul, and he could have been a different person, but he didn't live up to it. And in fact, he tried to kill when Sarah ultimately had a kid, and they named that Sarah and Abraham. They named their child Yitzchak, Isaac. Yishmael, in the guise of fooling around with bow and arrow, tried to kill Isaac. He tried to kill Yitzchak, and he would say, I was only kidding. Of course I knew I wasn't going to get you." And after Sarah saw this, she knew that she had to send him away, and so she told Abraham, "You have to send away Hagar and the boy." And it was very painful for Abraham, but Hashem told him, listen to Sarah, and you listen to everything Sarah tells you. And the commentators write in the commentary that Sarah had. Why did Hashem say that? Sarah had. Abraham was tuffle to Sarah in prophecy. Tuffle means secondary. You don't even notice it. She was the main prophet, and he was a lesser prophet. And so, so anyway, they send Avram with pain in his heart. He sends away Hagar and Yishmael, and Yishmael's sick, and he starts to die, and Hagar is beside herself, and she pushes the kid under near a bush somewhere, and she sits like a long way away so she shouldn't see him die, and because it's too painful for her, and she cries, and Hashem answers her cry, and he actually answers. Yishmael is crying, and he answers Yishmael's cry, and he tells, and he enables Hagar. It says she opened her eyes and she saw, they ran out of water. That was a big problem. She opened her eyes and she saw a well of water. And the commentaries say, what do you mean she opened her eyes? It means that the well was always there, but she couldn't see it. Same thing with something that you lost. It's always there, but we can't see it because we're nervous. So the first thing to do is calm down. Even if you lost your mind, I'm telling you, calm down. And calm down. And the next thing that you have to do, and I take this from a story of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov, I'm sure everybody heard of him. He was known as a miracle worker. He was also the proponent of Hasidus. He spread Hasidus. What is Hasidus? Hasidus is sort of like the inner secrets of the Torah. And he lived several hundred years ago, and you know, a lot of people will say, he never lived. He's a fable. He didn't live. Well, I have to tell you that my mother comes from him. So if he never lived, then I'm a figment of your imagination also, because my mother is a descendant of the Baal Shem Tov, and or so I heard from my relatives. And anyway, so now we're told there's so many stories about the Baal Shem Tov that legitimate sources tell us, if you believe every story, you're a fool. But if you don't believe that he could have done any of those things, if you don't believe that he had the ability to do every single one of those things, then you're also a fool, because his spiritual abilities were so great. So yeah.
Didn't you tell us that your grandmother was really amazing? Was she from the Baal Shem Tov?
No, I didn't tell you about this grandmother because my mother's mother I never met. And I don't know if I think my mother is descended not on her mother's side, but on her father's side from the Baal Shem Tov, because because the cousin who passed on this information is from my mother's father's side. And you know what my mother's maiden name was? My mother's maiden name was Heilig. If Heilig with a Yiddish accent is Heilig, it means holy. My mother's maiden name was Holy. So, so I think it's through her father's line, through the Heilig family, that that descended from the Baal Shem Tov. So, so anyway, there was one story when the Baal, I'm not telling you for the sake of the story, I'm telling you for the sake of the lesson. There was a story when the Baal Shem Tov and the person, his companion, were in terrible trouble, just terrible trouble. And to make matters worse, the Baal Shem Tov lost all his spiritual abilities. He lost all his window into heaven. He lost it all. Everything was normal. He was like a normal person. And so his companion was expecting him to rescue them, and he couldn't do anything. He had no spiritual powers whatsoever. And the guy himself, I think the companion himself, also forgot everything he knew. And the Baal Shem Tov, I might be getting part of this story wrong because I haven't seen it for a long time. The Baal Shem Tov said to the companion, "Don't you remember anything? I don't remember anything. Do you remember anything?" And the companion said, "Well, I remember the Aleph base." And so the Baal Shem Tov said, "Great, start repeating the Aleph base." And the friend was going, Aleph, base, base. And the Baal Shem Tov was relearning the Aleph base from this guy. And through learning the Aleph base, through getting down to basics, he recovered everything. And they got out of their pickle. So also for us, when we are Meshugana, when something has happened and we're incredibly stressed out, we should remember, what is my basics? I have to go back to the things that I know work for me. And forgive me, I have to take a drink. So for me, my basics are Am I clinging to my schedule? I have a schedule. If I leave the schedule is so good for me. It's like my tikkun in life. It's my rectification. It helps me do all the important things at the important time. And the Lubavitcher Rebbe is huge on the importance of schedule. Huge. And he's huge on it. I don't know if I told the story one time, but maybe I'll tell it during another time about the Rebbe's advice about keeping a schedule. But my second thing is Dibur. What comes out of my mouth influences me more than anything else in the world. If I speak in a panicked way, I am lost. If I speak with confidence and I say, Ribono Shalom, I know that you are going to help me. I know it. I'm not worried one bit. It's an instant cure for me. So, for me, my things are schedule and how I'm speaking. For everybody, it's going to be different because we're all different. We have different spiritual abilities, different spiritual keys to sanity. But after calm, the second thing is return to basics. What's Aleph base for you? And I'm going to actually end there, and I'm going to tell you that I'm going to end there because first of all, my voice left me twice today, and I have to teach tomorrow morning, so I don't want to speak too much. And in lieu of speaking more, I want to tell you that I wanted to find an essay that I wrote to send to somebody. And I haven't looked at my essays. I've written so many essays on faith and calm throughout the years. I actually wrote most of them many, many years ago. And I came across the essay that I needed to send to this person. And then in looking it up, I actually pulled up the wrong essay and I read it. I said, oh, that's pretty good. So anyway, if anybody wants an essay on faith and calm, you can just either raise your hand now and I'll email it to you, or you can send me an email because I don't have everybody's email here. You can send it to me at YGUTFREUND as in David at RCN as in Nancy.com. And can you raise your hands again? Okay. Okay, good, fine. Oh, I'm writing with invisible ink. Okay, fine. Okay, good. And I'm going to turn off the recorder, and and if anybody has any questions, then you'll let me know. Oh, I didn't mean to do that. Cancel. I don't want to turn off the recording. Oh,